For joining us. I know we're recording, so some people might be listening to this in the future. It is June 21st and it is Pride Month. It is also the solstice, so it's a time of renewal and beginnings and really welcoming in the light, and that's welcoming in all the energy that the light brings. So welcoming in information, and so I appreciate everyone being on this journey with us today. So for housekeeping, I know the chat function is open and available. I will not be able to see this, but Julie will monitor. Zoom, we will be using the annotate function on Zoom. So if you're not familiar with that, you might want to scroll to the top of your screen, and where you see the green bar, next to the green bar, you should be able to click on that and see an opportunity to annotate. And we'll be using that in one of the future slides. For questions, I'll be providing, so I'm sure there'll be questions. I am by no means an expert. I show up with my lived experience and just a really good heart for wanting to share information. And but I'll be providing resources. Then we may or may not have time for questions, and we'll see. But it also, in asking questions, it provides AFS-USA and the IDEA team, what a wonderful team AFS-USA has put together, as they continue to provide resources, and maybe in creating an FAQ sheet for, because your question will be valuable to everyone, not just on this call, but everyone in the United States as we move forward with supporting our host families and liaisons and other volunteers. Questions allow us to be vulnerable. We're not here to call people out. We are here to call people in. We are here to call everyone into the conversation, and we welcome that. So we can show up with that vulnerability and confidence that you are among family and you are in a comfortable space. As Julie said, if your camera's off, your camera's on, whatever you're comfortable with. So let's take a big, delicious breath all the way down to your lower third and hold it for a second. Then I want you to exhale fully up out the top of your head. Exhale, feel the energy go out the top of your head, and just let yourself settle in and anchor into the space as we get started. I want to share our objectives for today. Our objectives are to create a shared framework for vocabulary, better understand the history and the impact of the LGBTQ experience, and we'll be unpacking that too. Disrupting cultural norms. Disrupting is a disrupting term, but sometimes that's what's necessary in order for change to occur, right? The acorn has to break to become the tree. I want to talk about the awareness of the teenage experience. Now, I mean, it could be any experience, but we predominantly deal with teenagers. I have a family that hosts every year, and they said it's like the movie Groundhog Day. Every year they get a new, 16, 17-year-old boy, and it's all the same information every year. They start again. So let's be aware of the experience. Exploring the ever refining topics of gender and sexuality. Let's talk about how to be an ally. I know there are allies on this call, and I know we all identify as such, but what are other tools we can use? And what do we need to be aware of in that allyship? And also, what's really important for me to do and for AFS to do is present you with resources so you can go find things on your own and then digest them also in your own time. Also know, for me, this will be an equity-centered conversation for me. And what that means is I will continue to lean in towards the ideas, words, comments, and views of marginalized communities whose voice has been historically stifled, shunned, spoken over, or dismissed. This includes Black people of color, gay, lesbian, queer, transgender, tribal nations, or other community members. All right, let's play with our annotation. Has everybody been able to find that on the top of your screen? If you scroll to the top of your screen, maybe it will drop down. And Julie, I'm not seeing the same drop down as everyone else. So if, what does it say next to the green bar?
It says view option, and then if you select view option and select annotate, a bar should appear up top. And you can select from, draw or stamp. I think for this activity, we'll be using the stamps.
Yeah, use the stamps. There's funds, there's stars and hearts. And why don't you go and put a star or a heart or a check mark in the box that represents your generation. And this is the year you were born. Has everybody been able to find that? That's just kind of a fun interaction to just see where. It's a little hard on Zoom to know who your audience is. I had an opportunity to present with AFS in Washington, D.C. or in Virginia recently. So at least we got to see the audience in front of us. So this is wonderful. Thank you guys for playing along. We'll play with the annotation feature again. But so two things, Julie, I'm going to ask you to erase the board. And for those who have enacted their annotation feature, you might want to click in the upper right-hand corner. There's a little X that closes that. You might want to close it so it doesn't impact these slides going forward. Okay, so some agreements. Agreements, this is an awareness, it's not a training. I can't train away the years of experience, so we can't train what's in people's hearts. This is just an awareness. Any one of these slides could be an hour-and-a-half session in and of itself. There's a breadth, depth, and long history of this topic, which we will barely glide over the surface of. We're going to dip our toe in a lot of different topics for awareness, but then give you great resources that you can go and continue the learning. Or we might continue other sessions, who knows? Self-care, take care of yourself. Some topics or discussions, please know they could be triggering. You could find personally triggering and just not comfortable. So you have full permission to excuse yourself, take care of what you need. And let's be aware of, as we think about things and as we hear things, notice your reaction. I invite you to notice your reaction and notice what you feel you may do in that situation. And it's not your intent. It's not our intent. It's our impact over intent. So when we're working with a new community, and this translates very well to the intercultural and international space, we always have, there's an impact sometimes versus our intent. And again, AFS has always been about bridging borders and garnering understanding. And this is just another layer and level of it. And again, I applaud the organization for taking this very important step. And, on the quote on the bottom, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. You are here. And thank you for being here, and recognize and award yourself for being here. So be kind to yourself and let's prepare. And some other agreements of what we will be conscious of today: politics and religion. I will not be going into politics and religion. That being said, it's very difficult in this space to not glide over the surface. So I'm not here to, disparage or say one thing's good or bad or the other. It's not dualistic. These things exist and these entities exist. And so we just honor the space where everyone is. Using I, me, or I feel, or my experience, and moving into our ownership, our truth over comfort. And again, notice our judgments, notice our awareness, notice our initial reactions and feelings as certain topics come up. We'll always respect confidentiality, and maybe expect and accept non-closure. So as for me, and this will be the only slide about that, my lived experience in this space will further show itself. I will emphasize some areas and share my experiences as a very full experience. I am full of examples. You may hear passion, you may hear anger, you may hear fear, and hopefully there's no tears. There was a little yesterday when I was working on something, but no tears today, or we'll do our best. And standing in truth, and again, embracing our vulnerability and owning our story. So just know this is odd for me. I've spent most of my life trying to hide, trying to assimilate, trying to fit in, trying to not embarrass my family. I will tell you, I am a Gen Xer. I am in the beginning of Gen Xer. As a matter of fact, I went to see Janet Jackson last night. She was amazing. And I realized we are the same age. And if she can be on the stage still dancing like that, I can complete doing this. So I've spent a lot of time hiding, and I spent a lot of time in a little bit of fear of just what my family and what others could go through, or getting fired, and hiding and trying to assimilate, but not as a means of shame, but as damage control and fear of facing a world where I knew I wasn't going to be understood or accepted. Now here I am presenting this topic and myself to a national audience, an audience that I care deeply about and have full trust and faith in. So I see you and I trust you. And please trust I share this content from the deepest place and with the fullest respect of you taking this journey with me today. All right, so let's jump right into the terminology and identities, and we're going to jump into the big acronym, and we'll break it down and use it as our launching pad for information. The big acronym, the LGBTQ acronym, IAS. Now, why don't we go into our annotation feature again? And I'm not going to ask you to identify if you associate with one of these. What I'm going to ask you to do is to identify if there's something that you're curious and want to know more about. And it can be more than one. So put, a little star, a little heart, a little check mark in near any of them. So from the top of the screen again, if you could pull down the annotation feature. Because yeah, a lot of this stuff is new. And even the definitions can continue to evolve. So wonderful. I appreciate you participating in this. So we may move really quickly through the first few. All right, I am going to, everybody get in there? Great, so it's important again to understand and respect the terminology used by individuals to describe their identity and experiences. Okay, can you erase this? Yeah, let's see. Where is, oh, I'm not sure where everything is, but let's go with this. So, we're going to break it down over two screens because there's a lot of information. So most of you felt pretty comfortable with at least the first two or three terms. So I'm going to, just understanding that the term gay can be used more broadly. It's become an umbrella term, which, for the community itself. And for bisexual is a person who is emotionally, romantically, and or sexually attracted to both men and women. So transgender are individuals whose gender identity differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. Their gender identity. They may identify as male, female, or non-binary, and their gender identity may or may not align with societal expectations or norms associated with their assigned sex. But being transgender is about their internal sense of self and how they identify, rather than what they outwardly appear as. And just so you know, later on in the presentation, we're going to sort of break down transgender, transsexual, transvestite. Those all seem to show up. Okay, so for the second half, more importantly, of terminology and identities, queer is an umbrella term used to describe individuals who do not conform. So it's been used historically, it's been used derogatorily. This has been a tough one for me to continue to absorb because it was really an insult. However, more recent generations have really embraced it, and it has been identified outwardly as an identity. I've seen it often used in those who are deciding or not feeling a commitment to any one definition. And again, as it says there on the screen, some individuals may prefer this term as inclusive and a reclaimed identity. And intersex are individuals born with physical, hormonal, or genetic characteristics that do not fit typical binary notions of male or female. More androgynous. I remember seeing a 60 Minutes or 2020 piece years ago about the number of babies that were born with ambiguous genitalia and what did and did not happen to them. I'm not going to get into it. It's much deeper than my experience can really speak to. But if babies were raised as a certain gender because they were assigned that by a doctor, and I'm not suggesting it's dualistic, it was good or bad or right or wrong, but they really were feeling very differently. This happened more than, I think I did look it up. It was 1 in 500 births, I think, were ambiguous genitalia. And I'll leave it at that. You can do more research on your own. Asexual. This is another area of extreme judgment as one who feels traditionally, notice I didn't say normal, who feels traditional sexual urges and attractions, does not understand how someone does not have this drive. So this is a big area. Of people who identify as asexual are usually under a lot of judgment and feel they need to explain themselves. And this is a pain point for them. So two-spirited. Two-spirited is a term used and owned, by the way, by the Indigenous or Native Americans to describe the embodiment of both masculine and feminine qualities and spirits. Two-spirited individuals, pre-colonialism, were revered and holders of sacred roles, and usually were in positions of power. They were the healers, they were the visionaries, they were the leaders of the tribes. It's important to note that the understanding and recognition of two-spirited individuals it's specific to the Indigenous cultures, and should not be generalized or appropriated outside of these cultural contexts. Many cultures had gay, lesbian, and transgender people, but it only became shunned by societies during the colonization, and this is what happened with the native cultures. So they had decided to reclaim this, and they accepted this diversity in their history. And it was only as recently as 1990 that they decided to actively and proudly reclaim this term and use it in their culture. So again, please do not appropriate it, or if you hear someone else, part of our allyship we will learn is stepping up and stepping in to the conversation of it, just and the awareness that it's not appropriate. We do this often. I'm going to take a little dive here. How many times have we said, oh my gosh, you know, I feel so tired today. I think the sloth is my spirit animal. Well, spirit animal is a term that's very clear and is of a spiritual context to the native culture. And the fact that we continue, and some people continue to appropriate it in this kind of flippant way, is they do find quite insulting. So these are all areas, and it's like, oh my God, I don't know how many people are there. It's like, I had no idea. And that's okay. We don't know until we know, but we have an opportunity to know, and we have a responsibility to know. Some historical context. We're going to go through a timeline here, and I've selected areas. This is certainly not inclusive of everything, but I've selected some areas that I feel were pivotal in directing the movements that we see today. So, from the beginning of time to colonialism, things were fun. No, people behaved a certain way until they were informed, told, pressured that there was another way that they needed to be. And so really, from about 1492, and I'm going to just say till about, the 40s, 50s, there was more and more impact and influence of this movement. What we're going to cover today is, you see this tiny little area, this yellow and green, this tiny little area from 1950 to today. This is how recent all of this is. So we are all babies in this. So let's see if I can get my little clicky thing to work. I don't know where everything is. Okay, 5 clicks and I can get that. So in 1952, being a homosexual was listed by this as a sociopathic personality disorder by the American Psychological Association. Other associated traits were perversion and all of these fears. So this was legal. Your family could have you locked up and put away. Period. You could have things taken away from you, and your family could have you committed, and any other behavior under this context could also be seen as illegal. I don't know why this is not working. 1953, an executive order prohibited gay men and women from working for the government because they felt it would be too distracting. In 1969, this was pivotal also. The police raided the Stonewall Inn in New York, and this was led to riots, and many feel this was the catalyst for the LGBTQ movement. I also invite you that in that same year in Compton, California, there was an LGBTQ, there was a cafeteria riot. that was sort of a precursor to the Stonewall riot. And we're not going to get into that, but just know, yes, Stonewall, huge. Got a lot of publicity. Compton, Black neighborhood, didn't get a lot of publicity, but any subculture, news travels fast. Even though there was no internet, etc., the organization certainly shared information or individuals, and it was able to get to New York. So when this happened in New York, it created these, generated the riots. And then a year afterwards, people marched in celebration of, or in recognition of the riots that happened the year before. And this was sort of known as the first gay pride parade. I'm going to figure out where to click to make this thing move. Okay. In 73, the American Psychological Association voted homosexuality is not a mental disorder. But you can legislate something, but it doesn't change people's hearts. And when I tell you they voted that it is not a mental disorder, they did not do it by an overwhelming majority. It was 60% of the votes, still 40% of the members of the Psychological Association felt this was not correct. So it certainly was not overwhelming. In 78, Harvey Milk was the first openly gay man elected to political office in California, and he was assassinated 11 months later. People who rise up, this could be so, but we need to continue to have a voice, and we need to continue to be brave in doing that. He also inspired Gilbert Baker to develop a symbol of pride and hope, and he asked him to just be symbolic, but not so obvious that people would get hurt, but everybody would be able to rally behind it. And Gilbert stitched together the first rainbow flag. And I do remember in the, maybe it was the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I remember driving in a car with my grandmother in New Jersey, showing her that there was a rainbow sticker on a car and telling her what that meant. And she was just, no way. I said, yeah, I know that's what that means. In 79 was the first march on Washington, D.C. Is approximately 125,000 people. And that was also significant. Look at, I figured out where to click. Moving right along. In 1981, this was pivotal. And I mean, I may be giving this extra emphasis because this was in my lifetime, but in 1981 was the first recognized case of AIDS. But it also became known as gay disease. And it was dubbed that, and therefore marginalized and feared, which impacted any early efforts to address it. And because it was initially being ignored, I can tell you certain organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, the gay, lesbian, oh gosh, I'm losing the acronym right now, but they are for media and promotion, came into be. MTV, which was huge when they used to play music, if some of you remember that. MTV said, we have the demographic, we're in, we're going to help. They formed a division called Lifebeat. And Lifebeat, and I actually volunteered with them when I was in New York. We'd go to concerts and we'd hand out information and hand out condoms. And Lifebeat was prominent in getting the word out there about what was going on, because traditional media and the traditional, it was because it was a gay man's disease and therefore being ignored. Also, this last logo here is Broadway Cares. You can still go to a Broadway show, not necessarily in New York, or any musical show, and at the end, if it's a professional equity show, they may collect money for Broadway Cares. So the community, the family, that supported the gay community, and I'm going to use that term generically, came together to support its own. There were so many others. I don't know if anybody remembers the Quilt Project, and so many other efforts. for one, went to too many funerals of friends during the late 80s, more the early 90s. And it was horrible watching your friends just waste away for no other reason than how they loved. Another organization called Silence Equals Death. They were really strong. They were not sugarcoating anything. They still won't sugarcoat anything. And they were hard-nosed and highly disruptive and in the face, but sometimes that's what's necessary to get action and get the word out there. I'm going to drop in here for a second and just share when I was in 1983, 84, there was an AFS host mom in Randolph, New Jersey, if anybody's here from New Jersey. And I became friends with her because I was friends with the exchange student she was hosting. And we stayed friends. Her name was Carol. And Carol and I were still in contact today. But Carol was a deacon in her church. And she was at a hospital doing ministry work. And she said she walked by a door and she saw a food tray on the floor. And she asked the man if she said, your food tray is out here on the floor. Don't you want to eat? And he said, nobody will bring me my food. I have AIDS and nobody will come near me. And so she brought him his food, and then she continued to seek out other people with AIDS and minister to them. She set forth to put together an organization called Interfaith Aid, which were members of the cloth from numerous religions. It became quite a national and I think even international movement. I know they got publicity. I remember somehow they wove Interfaith Aid into the storyline of like a soap opera and a few other shows. They were getting attention. And this was all, you know, one of our AFS moms, Carol, had started this. She also then started an organization called Angel Connection to minister to children who had AIDS because of their parents passed it on to them, or from some type of other infusion, or however they got it. But these children were being ignored as well. And so she really did a lot of amazing work, and I got to work with her and volunteer. And one year, and especially during a time when I was trying to hide, it's not that I didn't go to the Pride marches in New York, it's that I went and kind of stayed out of the view of the camera because I didn't want to be seen and I didn't want to be known. I didn't want to embarrass my family. And she and the Interfaith Aid group were going to march in the beginning, not the very beginning. We all know that's Dykes on Bikes, right? But the next group was the Interfaith Aid group. All of these, the rabbis and the ministers and the deacons and the priests marching and getting a lot of publicity. And I remember I was carrying her purse and her coat, and all I could think about is, oh my gosh, I hope a camera doesn't come on me. You know, doesn't show my face. But I was so proud, but you know, I have to live my life, and she still gets to go home and live her cis heteronormative life. So that's another conversation, but I was so proud of her and so proud to be there and marching down Christopher Street with her. So huge movement. Yay, AFS mom. In 1993, don't ask, don't tell forbid military members from being openly gay or lesbians, or individuals could not serve in the military, and also forbid any harassment towards anyone that is not open about their sexuality. In 1996, the Defense of Marriage Act was signed into law, defines marriage as a legal union between one man and one woman, and that was for federal purposes. So the goal of that was to squash the idea of anybody gay ever being married, if they made it a law that this had to be. In 2003, the Supreme Court ruling in Lawrence versus Texas strikes down, criminalizes sex acts, essentially, which they actually put laws into place to say, hey, people who have sex in this way should be arrested. And you actually have to go to court to say, hey, you can be intimate in this way, and it's now legal. So, yes, I have an opinion about it, but I'm sorry, I just do. 2004, Massachusetts, first state to allow same-sex marriage. 2010, Don't Ask, Don't Tell is repealed, allowing openly gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals to serve in the US military. And again, if you can legislate all you want, it doesn't change people's hearts, and it doesn't change their beliefs that have already been put into place. So it's still an uphill battle. And if you haven't had to have your rights before Congress or before the Supreme Court, then this is a definition of privilege. Very rarely do we see ourselves as privileged. But I'm privileged, right? I'm white, I speak English, I'm able-bodied. I have numerous ways that I am privileged in this society. As do, I'm sure, many of us, and then others not. But this was a form of privilege. In 2013, the Defense of Marriage Act for the Supreme Court ruling strikes down a key provision of DOMA, granting federal recognition to same-sex marriages. Again, the Supreme Court needs to be involved in changing laws that people set up for no other reason than their beliefs. Come up 2015, Supreme Court again, rule grants recognition of same-sex marriages. And 2020, Supreme Court ruled employment protections. Employment protections, yes. In many cases, you could be fired in this prohibited workplace discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Again, you can't legislate away what people really want to do, but it's a good starting point. And here, popping up, you can see these little logos. PFLAG, these are about the years these organizations came into being. PFLAG is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, and we'll talk about that. Lambda Legal is just that, a gay legal network of lawyers that are ready to help. NCLR is the National Center for Lesbian Rights. And GLSN, SEN is the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, and discrimination and harassment and bullying. And they sponsor events. And here's the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project is one of those ones that we're going to take note of. The Trevor Project is education for LGBTQ and questioning youth. This is specifically focused on youth, and it's focused on acceptance and hence suicide prevention, only because it was from a 1994 Academy Award winning film. It was a short film called Trevor, about a gay 13-year-old boy who was bullied because of his sexuality and attempts suicide. So because of its popularity, the producers felt a need to continue to give back, and the Trevor Project was born and is still going strong today. Another organization I did not know about, and I was happy to find, is this little logo right here. Let me see if I can blow that up here, is Outright. And Outright is an Outright Action International, is a worldwide LGBTQ human rights movement initially focused in Russia, is where it started. The organization is active worldwide in the Americas, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. It has a headquarters in New York, AFS. As we continue to look for resources to support our host families and students. We have students coming in from all over the world, right? I cannot cannot exit this topic without discussing power privilege. This is so important. As with any culture, there is often subculture derivations as well. So power privilege is, one of the subculture privileges is just the art of passing. But also, actually, before I get into that, let me talk about the power privilege in the gay community is still white, cisgender, gay, or genderqueer males. They continue to hold the power position. Cisgender is means that you identify with the biological gender that you were born. I am a cisgender queer female. So cisgender female, I was born a woman, I identify as woman, and I'm gay. I use the term queer, which I've actually never used before, but lesbian. So let's talk about the art of passing. The trans and queer community favor those who can pass. And then again, any sub-community has its own hierarchical structure, meaning that in their transgender way of expression, they can best emulate the appearance of their identity aligned with the social acceptance of that identity. The more you look like a female, if you're transitioning and into a female, then that is seen as you're able to pass. And you'll hear that term within the community is they're able to pass. Now, back in the day, when I say back in the day, I do have to say, and my grandmother was gay. My grandmother was a lesbian. And as my mother says, try having a lesbian mother in the 50s. Not fun. She, and my grandmother wouldn't really talk about it. She was of the generation, there was when we were talking about the gender, like don't talk of the generations, she'd do not talk. And she would tell me, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And with that, she didn't share a lot. I know very few stories, but one of the things she said is if one person could definitively look male and the other person could definitively look female, the police would leave you alone. But if they thought for a moment that you were two women, she said you were just going to get beat up. And I know she was beat up a couple of times, but she didn't talk about it. She didn't talk about it much. I also want to talk about Black and brown gay lesbians and the trans community continue to deal with discrimination, which are now only magnified. This is important because their journey is made even that much more difficult. The intersectionality of being Black and gay is often seen in their so this is now the subculture, right? As a disappointment to the community who believes that they are trying to be seen as equal. And here you are ruining it for us, right? Or here you are ruining it for whatever spiritual belief they may follow. So the intersectionality of this is difficult. And Kimberly Crenshaw, Dr. Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality in the 70s. She initially started, her work was about studying lawyers, Black female lawyers, and the intersectionality and the power position of being Black, of being a female, and of being a lawyer, and some of the juxtapositions, and that was her research. And I think when Hillary Clinton was running for office, she used this term on the campaign trail, which made it blow up again. And then people have been sort of appropriating it for any number of permutations of intersectionality. And Dr. Crenshaw is fine with it. She's happy that it's out there and continuing to be used in such an educational way, and that people are having the discussions. And so these areas intersect in their complexity. So know that whatever struggle anyone in the BIPOC community was having, just showing up in the world, in their culture and community, it is now magnified. So their experience is more intense. When I dated someone many years ago who was Black, and we were together for 17 years. But before that, we had a difficult time in the early part of our relationship. And when we finally sat down to say, what's wrong? She said, listen, you have to understand, I'm a female, I'm Black, I'm gay, and now I'm going to be dating a white woman. I'm going to be dating outside of my culture. I have to be prepared to lose people that maybe would have loved me, even through all of these other areas where I've lost people. She said, now I'm going to be stigmatized and I have to prepare myself for this loss. Now, I share that very revealing story to because it's so very true, it's so very impactful, and this is what people experience. And I thought it was important to share, so I hope you don't mind that I shared that. Global perspectives. Well, this is what we do. We work with students internationally. We go ourselves internationally. We send our students overseas. Our students come here. Our students are teenagers, and they are exploring themselves, their worlds, who they are and how they show up literally in the world, how they show up in the world. And you know, this continuum is no different. Now, I do have a graph to share with you, and I share it with the caveat that this is information I found this month, June of 2023. Things are ever evolving and changing, and this is not a reflection necessarily of the heart of a country or culture, but this is some of their truth at the moment. So if you identify as anything different than heterosexual, cisgender, or heteronormative, and you want to either go to or come from any of these countries, you may have a different experience. So for any, and this plays out just like a traffic signal, right? Green, there's great acceptance, rules, and even laws in place for acceptance and inclusion. Any of the countries that are yellow, proceed with great caution. They're working on it. They're making strides. And then the countries in red right now, just not safe. It's just not safe. And also, you know, we may get students from these countries. We may get students who identify differently from these countries. We're not here telling you that you need to do any type of intervention or anything, but just be aware that I think we've learned over the years that when students come here, they know they can express freely. Also, just know, even looking at your own community, we here, for the most part, I think everyone here is in the US, and I just went through a whole bunch of Supreme Court rules that we have in place. It doesn't mean anything. You know, from block to block in your own town or in your own state, from county to county, you know there can be vast differences. I live in Portland, Oregon, highly liberal city. It's the keep Portland weird, right? Same with Austin, keep Austin weird. But I don't know about Austin, but you go a mile outside of the city and, you know, you need to be a bit cautious. And if you've never had to adjust your travel plans or consider where you're going to go based on charts like this, then you have privilege. When my partner and I, that I was just sharing about, we're going to move from New Jersey to California. We were going to drive across the US, see the states, take the southern route, and then we had to say, wait a minute, 2 women, 1 very dark-skinned Black, and myself traveling, 2 women traveling through the South. Can't do it. It's not safe. It just was not safe. So we had to adjust our plans. Safety is not a privilege everyone gets to enjoy. That's hard to hear, but this is part of that discomfort. So navigating curiosity and the journey. So we're going to wade into the water now. We dipped our toe into some things. We're going to wade in about up to our ankles, because here in doing our best to support our AFS family, and let's be clear, again, we work with teenagers. They are evolving, growing, discovering, and they're complex. And if you've had a teenager, maybe they can be a little moody and unpredictable. Or maybe predictable, I don't know. Again, I put a disclaimer, I'm not a psychologist or a social worker. So please know all experiences vary, and it's my permutation of many variables of just being that teenager and doing volunteer work. So, let's explore this journey together and get out your walking sticks. Let's do it. So how do we navigate the curiosity for the students? They're questioning their gender identity. They may feel confused, uncertain, anxious, and possibly you might see a range of emotions. Just some things to look out for. The self-discovery. They may engage in self-exploration, trying on different gender expressions, experimenting with different names or pronouns. I think this is absolutely natural, especially now. Let me see am I clicking in the wrong place again? So they may, in this self-discovery, they may seek out information, resources, or support, from trusted individuals or LGBTQ organizations, but also as an ally, if you even feel we can make this available. We'll talk more about that. If coming out is part of the process, coming out can be significant and challenging step. They may fear rejection, stigma, or lack of understanding from the family, friends, or community. So it's important to approach their coming out process with love, acceptance, and support, allowing them to share their experience on their own terms. So gender dysphoria. So many, this is a distress caused by a mismatch between the feelings assigned at birth and their gender identity. And this can, this can manifest in any number of ways. Anxiety, depression, discomfort, and, just feeling awkward and difficult in social, scenarios. So how can we as allies, and as those who care, support them? And yes, we're talking about, I'm saying exchange students. This could be our own children. It could be our nieces, our nephews. It could be our brother, our sister. It could be anybody. It could be us. It could be anyone. So in navigating the curiosity, just know if they come out or if they come to you, you don't need to fix anything. You don't need to fix anything. And we're going to continue to, lead with love, listen, lead with love. And for some, this will be a natural response, right? So for others, long-held beliefs may get in the way of being able to respond positively and supportively. So as best you can, and however, remember this, no matter how easy or difficult learning about a child's sexual orientation or gender is for you, it was probably just as difficult for them, and especially difficult for them to come out to you, possibly. And while saying that I support you or I love you is an obvious way to express your love for a child or for the teen, if you find yourself at a loss for words and it's appropriate, a hug is always speaks volume. And speaking of hugs, I have some of the PFLAG logos up here, but I want to, create more. Of course, I have to put the PFLAG of Oregon logo up there, right? So But look, I mean, PFLAG is all over the United States. There's El Paso, you know, Orlando, San Diego, there's that Jacksonville, Florida. I mean, these are just a few. Oklahoma, Denver, Colorado, where else? Oh, what is that? Boston, you know? So, I mean, and then I just put in there because I thought this was awesome that, that Portland even has a Black chapter for parents and friends of lesbians and gays. And when PFLAG started in the 70s, it was because so many people were disowned by their families. I know a lot of people who were disowned by their families. And it's painful. It's incredibly painful when your parent or parents do not accept you. Incredibly a huge loss. And what the PFLAG volunteers would do is they would go to the parades and they would hold up signs or wear pins that said mom hugs available. Mom hugs available. And I would watch people go up and get hugs and cry. And these, oh, no, I'm going to cry. And these moms would just, you know, show up. It wasn't their kids, but it was somebody's kid. And this is why when we say there's your, you know, biological family and your chosen family, and this is a term we've actually used in the gay community, we'll say, hey, look at them. Are they family? Do you think they're family? You know, do you think they're gay? But that was a term we used because for some of us, it was the only family we had. I am very lucky. My family, my parents love me dearly. And I am going with my partner to see them next Wednesday, and they can't wait to meet her. But but not everybody has that. And I am incredibly aware of this, and it's incredibly painful. So we've become each other's families. And PFLAG. PFLAG is also not only national AFS, it's also international. So if our parents need support, there's plenty of information on the PFLAG website. This is part of the resources we will share at the end. I didn't get to even like listen with intention. So, you know, of course, just giving ample opportunity to the child to open up. And whenever they want to talk about their hopes for the future or situation, and just being able to listen. If you have a sense that your loved one may want to talk, but isn't doing so on their own, you can open with some gentle questions about how are things at school, or hey, are you still hanging out with Cindy? You guys were talking last week. And also showing subtle support. If overt support is a stretch at first, remember that subtle support can also make a difference, whether it's speaking positively about an LGBTQ person. Thankfully, there's more and more in the news and on television shows and television shows themselves, or a character that you may know, just to maybe take their temperature to see where they are if they want to speak. Or even this month say, hey, you know, the Pride Festival's downtown, this, you know, on Sunday, it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun. Do you want to go? Just something like that. I mean, can you step out even that's uncomfortable for you? Maybe you've never been. What does that mean? I invite us all to look at what would that mean to show up. I shared that I already had a huge problem with it, but I will be going. Ours in Portland is next month. And of course, learn the terms. What is sexual orientation? What does it mean to be bisexual? Learning the language is a great way to start having the conversations. And all of those, that information, there's a great glossary available on the pflag.org website. Whew. And what about you in all of this? You get to be, you're important in this too. So you're not expected to be an expert, and don't take on the pressure. Remember that you are not alone. If you don't have a neighbor or a friend or another parent or even support through AFS, there is all these organizations that I've been talking about. There's information on their website. There's people in town. There's other mothers and fathers and parents, or, you know, guardians that would have been through it, and they're happy to support. And know that this is a journey. This is a journey for you. This is a journey for the student or your child or your nephew or whomever. And And again, learn the terms. Everything I was reading was like, learn the terms. And I know when I do DEI trainings, and one of the things when I was at the National Conference for Race and Ethnicity that I heard many of my Black colleagues say is, we're exhausted. We're exhausted. It's not our job to teach you how to treat us. And you're going to find something very similar in the gay community as well. So let's educate ourselves and not count on those who identify in that way, or who show up, or who their primary identifier is such, to train us how to be. That doesn't mean you cannot ask questions. You certainly can. Gender identity. So what are those identities? What do we need to know about the gender identities? So gender identity, personal conception of oneself as male or female, or rarely both or neither. This concept is intimately related to the concept of gender role, which is defined as the outward manifestation of personality that reflect the gender identity. We're going to break that down more. It's a personal conception of oneself. So my favorite image to use that I've been using for a few years now is the genderbread person. Love the genderbread person. So the genderbread person will break down into these 4 key areas. The first being identity, and that, as you can see, is positioned to the brain. And then the whole person, you can see this line in the outside, is the expression. What is their gender expression? Then there's the sex, and this is what most people think about. And there is then the attraction. So what possible permutations can come from all of these ingredients? So the gender identity is up here. Let me see if I can make that. So the gender identity is your range of how you in your head define your gender based on how much you align or don't align with what you understand to be the options for gender. So this is just how you feel. This is how the student may feel. And again, it's how they feel, it's what they're experiencing. So now their expression, how they express themselves, the way you present gender through your actions, and I'll blow that up too, your actions or your dress or your demeanor or how you present yourself to the world. Do you dress in an androgynous fashion? Do you like to dress in what would be a traditional female attire or male attire, or just really neutral? So that's your expression. Now, this is what most people focus on, is the biological sex. And so this is the physical characteristic you were born with and develop, including genitalia, body shape, voice pitch, body hair, hormones, chromosome, etc. And then, of course, there's the heart, right? There's the heart. It's attraction. Who are you sexually attracted to, and who are you romantically attracted to? And it's also could be nobody. So know that that is an option. So when people say that my identity is female, they're not talking about sex. And just because their identity is female does not automatically mean they're attracted to men. Do you see how that kind of jumps around and works? If somebody is dressed masculine, in a masculine way, but they identify as female, and their dress is different, then it could all be any number of permutations. It's one of my statistics professor friends, you can do the numbers of the possible permutations available. So what are the sexual orientations here? Well, heterosexual, right? Individuals who are attracted to people of the opposite gender. Homosexual, attracted to the same gender. Pansexual, attracted to people regardless of gender. Asexual, no sexual attraction to others. I met a young man this weekend. He's in college. He was home for the summer, and I've known him since he was 14. He just said, he goes, yeah, I identify as pan-poly. He's pansexual and polyamorous. So he will be attracted to boys or girls, or men or women, and polyamorous, meaning he will, I didn't actually ask him to define it for me of what it means to him, but he might have more than one partner at the same time, collectively or individually. And that's college sometimes. The trans, I said earlier, I was gonna break down some transgender, transsexual, and transvestite. I have some long extended definitions here. And I did this because I know this presentation will live in perpetuity, or at least for a while. So that way these are on here without me explaining them. But it's transgender is, again, we went over this as a bit of an umbrella term used to describe individuals whose gender identity differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. Transsexual, the term transsexual is less commonly used than it used to be. It's sort of outdated. And historically, it was used to describe individuals who undergo desired medical interventions, such as hormone therapy, etc. And transvestite. Transvestite refers to individuals who derive pleasure or satisfaction from dressing in clothing traditionally associated with the opposite gender. This does not mean they're gay or that they're queer or that they have any other different representation. I had a friend whose husband liked to wear fishnet stockings occasionally. Don't yuck somebody's yum, as somebody once told me, you know, hey, if that's your thing, that's your thing. But he wasn't interested in men. He was very much in a very healthy relationship with his wife. They had children. He worked with, you know, the Boy Scouts. He worked in his church. So did the what they were fine. There was nothing about it other than this is how he felt occasionally. So what's in a name? And so, as Rachel Maddow, the best thing about coming out of the closet is that nobody can insult you by telling you what you've already told them. So pronouns. Pronouns are important. They are more prominent. We are seeing them more and more. We've used them. It is important to recognize that gender identity is diverse and can extend beyond the traditional binary of male and female. And people may identify with pronouns that reflect their gender identity or not. And it's crucial to respect and affirm their choices. Mispronouncing somebody is no different than calling them by a different name. So now I also invite those of you who are Gen Xers and boomers, and if you remember in the 70s that the introduction of Ms. MS came into being versus Mrs. The only two options for women were Mrs. or Miss, MISS. And MS, Ms. came into being, and it was quite a roar. But we're used to it now. And you may find that this is the same. So some of the pronouns and all the English teachers and professors, just be with it. This is just going to be he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs, and sie, here, here's, they, them, theirs, and vi, ver, vis. I have not known of anyone to use the last one. I think maybe, and I've also seen she, them, theirs. So these are even moving in their own permutations. It's tough, it's difficult. In my day job, I have an employee who uses they, them, and I have messed up twice. And very publicly, they corrected me in a meeting. So I'm not immune to messing up. We all just continue to exercise that muscle. We ask people their pronouns, and we try to remember and respect them. And I can equate it again for most of the people that filled out the little dots on their stars and hearts on that first slide. It's transitioning to Ms. It's quite similar. And for all of us on this call, how can we continue to be an ally? So becoming aware of the pronouns, ask and share, create a culture of inclusivity by sharing your own pronouns first. Or if you're in an event, wear them on your badge, or if you're in a Zoom call, put them after your name, because what that does for somebody who's trying to introduce themselves in what we construe as a non-traditional way is provides a space of inclusivity that they are willing to share theirs, if you're willing to share yours. And please be careful of avoid assuming somebody's pronoun. Please ask. Let's get into the habit of asking first. Avoid using a pronoun based on appearance. It's super hard. I get it. But it's one of those muscles we need to continue to exercise. Introduce pronouns in meetings, normalize the use, include in daily events, in meetings, in classrooms, and when you're introducing somebody, the more you use it and encourage individuals to share their pronouns. Normalize this practice. This is almost like your own training to teach. It teaches us to be more aware. And one of the best ways for all of my teachers in the room, one of the best ways for anybody to learn anything is for them to teach it to somebody else. So as we continue to teach others by introducing them with their pronouns, we will continue to reinforce that for ourselves. And respect privacy. Understand that not everyone may be comfortable sharing their pronoun openly. Respect their choice and use gender-neutral language if you're unsure. And that means probably they, them, until you're advised otherwise. So be sensitive and supportive. Practice active listening. When listening attentively, when someone shares their pronouns, and use them consistently, pay attention to corrections and apologize. Just apologize if you make a mistake. Educate yourself. Familiarize yourself with gender identity, terminology, including pronouns, read books, etc., articles, avoid assumptions. And here's a key for an ally, and this goes also in the DEI space. Correct others and interject yourself for correction and gentle guidance, or sometimes it's demonstrative guidance. Sometimes it's stopping what's happening. Please use your allyship, use your privilege. If you miss if you witness or are in an experience, this is so important. Because when we don't, it tells the person either they don't know that something needs to be corrected, or it reaffirms whatever space they're working in. I dare say the term prejudice, it's just whatever space they're working in. And foster inclusive environments, create spaces where individuals feel safe to express their gender identity, etc. I found this ally, this acronym for ally, always center the impact, listen and learn from those who live in oppression, leverage your privilege, and yield the floor. The woman who had this on Twitter, this acronym, I reached out to her to see if I could use it, and she's certainly sourced there as well. So for allyship, again, the Anti-Oppression Network is an active and consistent and arduous practice of unlearning and reevaluating which a person in position of privilege and power seeks to operate in solidarity with marginalized groups. Again, being accepting, taking action, and having humility. Also, again, we said this earlier, it's not gay people's job to teach you how to treat them. So that sounds harsh, but just be aware that they're tired. They're tired too. Words matter. So if so here's just some examples, right? So if you're in a cis hetero relationship, traditional husband and wife, please consider I invite you to start using the term partner when referencing your husband or wife. Start doing that for yourself. This is a little bit homework assignment to see if it feels right for you, if you can try this on, if you can do this, because it invites other people. Husband and wife are very traditional roles, and there's a lot of meaning and actually at one time ownership associated with that. So possibly if it feels right for you, practice using the term partner. Do not feel a need to add that you have a gay friend or relative. I cannot tell you how many people have come up to me and said, oh, I have a gay cousin kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to do with that. So, thank you. I don't know. It's not a necessary conversation. I know what you're looking to do is connect. I know what we're always looking to do is connect. And in that allyship, that's not the best way to show up with your allyship. Trans, if somebody we know is trans, do not ask about their surgery or feel a need to introduce them or identify as such, or ask them what's next in their medical treatments, etc., or how do they do it. I mean, if you're super, super close to them and they're willing to share that, you may ask them if it's a really close person, what they're willing to share, or what do you need to know, or how can you best support them? And then they may open up with what they need. Pronouns, ask, use them, practice. And please don't say, oh, this is Brenda, her preferred pronouns are they, them. No, not preferred. Those are their pronouns. I would never say to my new best friend here, Julie, like, Julie's preferred name is Julie, but, call her whatever you want. Awesome marketing director or something like that. I think it's really the moniker and human. So please don't use the term preferred. It's the little things, because words matter. Words are power. They have an energy and a power, and they land with people. So be careful of our words. And yes, we will be wrapping up. I can show you on the side of my mug here. I keep this. It says seek knowledge and spread peace. And I take that with me every day. And so just seek out information and education. Come from a place of curiosity, empathy, not sympathy. Step up and step in, and your allyship and inclusivity. Use your privilege to make that difference. We can do it. Here are some resources. Here's some of the resources I was telling you about before, and their logos. Again, PFLAG International, the National Center for Transgender Equity. If you have anybody that you're aware of that you want to be able to support and find better conversations for, or to support your team, if you have students, volunteers, etc. Again, I point out the Trevor Project and Outright Action International. So quickly, this was a journey for both teenager and for those who support them, whether you're their biological parent, teacher, coach, sibling, or just the cool aunt or uncle. This is unknown land, and you've only read about in travel guides, right? And I realized that this is just another travel guide, what we presented today, because once you actually land and with your passport is stamped, that's when everything will show up. And it's like, now what do I do? Make it meaningful. And let's continue to reach out and continue to help each other along the way. It's what AFS is about. It's why you're all here. It's why you all participate. And it is the gift we give each other, ourselves, and the world every day, this gift. So I thank you for your time today and your listening and your ear. And feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And can you hear me okay? Because I had to call in on my phone.
I can hear you.
My audio on my computer wasn't working, but I just want to
Oh,
say
no.
a big thank you.
Oh my goodness.
And if you can still hear me okay, just that we'll be sharing this out, the recording in addition to the resources. And if you're willing to share the presentation, Brenda, we can share that as well. But again, thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you since you're an AFS volunteer, and I look forward to working with you further.
Thank you. I'm taking I'm a liaison to a young man who's leaving on Monday, and then we're going to dinner tonight.
Enjoy.
So I get a nice, he loves Italian food. He's going back to Japan. So we're going for Italian food tonight.
That's great. Thank you so much for being a liaison, and thanks everyone for joining the call. And again, please feel free to share this recording once it's sent out, and the additional resources that we'll be sending in addition to the recording. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brenda.
Be well, everyone.
Bye, everybody.